David's confession deepens in verses 3 through 6. He moves from pleading for mercy to acknowledging his sin. His confession reveals David's understanding of sin's nature and God's righteousness. Verse 3 declares David's awareness of his transgression. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Psalm 51, verse 3. The word acknowledge means to know or recognize. David does not deny his wrongdoing. The phrase, my transgressions, shows his personal responsibility. The statement, and my sin is ever before me, describes David's continual awareness of his guilt. The phrase, ever before me, means constantly in his sight. David cannot escape the memory of what he did. His sins haunt him. This awareness drives him to seek God's forgiveness. David faces his sins. Verse 4 identifies the primary offense. Against thee, thee only, have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest. Psalm 51, verse 4. The expression, against thee, thee only, have I sinned, emphasizes the vertical dimension of sin. David wronged Uriah by murdering him. He also wronged Bathsheba by committing adultery with her, and he wronged the nation by abusing his power. Yet David recognizes that all sin is against God. The repetition, thee, thee only, stresses this truth. God's law defines right and wrong. When David violated God's commandments, he sinned against God himself. The phrase, and done this evil in thy sight, acknowledges that God witnessed David's actions. Nothing was hidden from God's view. David committed his sin before God's face. The clause, that thou mightest be justified when thou speakest, and be clear when thou judgest, vindicates God's righteousness. The word justified means declared righteous. God's judgment of David's sin proves God's justice. The phrase, when thou speakest, refers to God's pronouncement of judgment. God spoke the truth about David's sin. The expression, and be clear when thou judgest, means God is blameless. Verse 5 reveals David's understanding of his sinful nature. Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Psalm 51, verse 5. The word behold calls attention to an important truth. David wants God to see his condition. The phrase, I was shapen in iniquity, describes David's formation in the womb. The word shapen means formed or brought forth. David was brought forth with a sinful nature. The parallel statement, and in sin did my mother conceive me, does not suggest that conception is sinful. Marriage and procreation are gifts from God. Rather, David acknowledges that he inherited a sinful nature. From conception, David possessed a nature inclined towards sin. David does not use this truth to excuse his behavior. He does not say, I could not help sinning because I was born this way. Rather, David explains the depth of his problem. His sin with Bathsheba flowed from his sinful nature. He needs God to change him at the deepest level. Verse 6 contrasts God's desire with David's condition. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part thou shalt make me to know wisdom. Psalm 51, verse 6. The word behold again draws attention to God's standard. The phrase, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, reveals what God wants. Desirest means delights in, or takes pleasure in. God delights in truth. The expression in the inward parts refers to the inner person. God cares about our internal reality, not just our external behavior. The phrase, and in the hidden part, thou shalt make me to know wisdom, expresses David's hope. The hidden part refers to the secret places of the soul. David asks God to teach him wisdom. The word wisdom means skill in living according to God's will. David needs God to transform his inner life. These verses teach profound truths about sin and confession. Sin is against God. Our sin offends God's holiness. Genuine confession acknowledges both specific sins and our sinful nature. God desires truth in the inner person, not just outward conformity. Only God can produce wisdom and righteousness in our souls.